So what are we doing, or what have we done in the Diocese of Marquette? So about 6 years ago, this is my 10th year there, we were without a bishop. They call it sede vacante in the Catholic Church. And that gave me a year to basically relax. But at that time we said, let's get this curricula thing going. Let's see if we could build something more from the ground up. We'd been tweaking some things, but we wanted to start, doing something more comprehensive and deep. So we wrote a really brief document, which we call the Foundations document, which is the vision for a Catholic classical curriculum. Our new bishop came in about 2 months into his tenure, read this document, and was 100% enthusiastically supportive of this vision. That was a fun day. We're in our 5th year of our adoption. There's 9 elementary schools in our diocese. We're staffed by a total of approximately 100 teachers. And one of these teachers has had some educational experience of a classical nature. So that's 99 who have not had any. This culture change that we're attempting to make is pretty huge. What do our schools look like now that's different than when they look like before our curriculum? One more thing I wanted to say about how we're doing it. There's schools around the country that have done this somewhat overnight, but that wasn't the case in our situation. We didn't have the infrastructure, the ability to train, the transition, the curriculum wasn't ready. So we've worked on discipline by discipline, and I'm going to go through those. That's how we're doing this transition. Let's look first at literature, poetry, grammar, composition, and Latin. So in literature, we simply upgraded our list of books that the kids would read, and we made them common for all the schools. Because in every school, there were, let's say, some average books that were being read, and so we just made them of a higher quality. So that now we can really be proud of that aspect of what we've done. And I'm going to move quickly to poetry. And by the way, I read St. Michael's reading list. If you haven't done that, what a great reading list. I mean, I want to go to that school. I do. I want to get the classical education I didn't get when I was a teenager. But with poetry, every one of our students in every grade level is exposed to 15 or so poems per year. We are expecting the students to memorize about 6 to 8 of those poems per year, which is a new thing for our teachers. They, number one, didn't teach much poetry, and number two, memorize poetry. All of that was new, but now that we're doing it, we know how easily these kids can absorb and memorize. It's a beautiful thing. What's it tied to? Well, the poems that they're memorizing are expressions of goodness, truth, and beauty. The themes within the poems. And that stays in their heart, right? As they're older, they'll carry that with them. And that's a good thing that everybody would want, to have for their children. And related to poetry, I would say kind of under the public speaking realm, we have what we call a list of recitations, which really are mainly in our primary school up through 4th grade. They're facts in the different subject areas, including scripture verses, Psalms, New Testament, math facts, science, LA, history, and geography. They memorize and recite them in their class during the year. That, again, has been something where the teachers are pleased that this is another way they can get the content into the students' heart, and that's working well for us. We do use the methodology of Socratic discussions. I noticed that it's a priority at St. Michael's, which is wonderful. This method calls forth from students the expectation that they contribute to the conversation and that they stick to the evidence of what the author has presented. And that strengthens the students' ability to argue, to listen to others, to have a reasonable give and take, respectful conversation. Really important today. St. Michael's, I noticed, teaches logic that goes along with this. And at a high school level, that's very important. In the subject of grammar, we believe learning grammar is important. An essential technique and way that we can demonstrate your mastery of grammar is to diagram sentences. And so we have put a real emphasis on teaching that skill in our approach to grammar. We are finding that this emphasis has been very successful compared to how much grammar our kids used to know. I mean, it's significant. There's actually a classical method of composition that goes back a long time, probably the 500s, maybe to the Greeks. It's based on the principle of imitation. And all that means is you take a model of excellence, excellent writing, and you work on rephrasing it in your own words. The more you practice doing this method of imitation, the better writer you're going to become. And we have found that again to be very successful. Progress is definitely happening. Latin. We made the decision when we started to require Latin in the schools, which can be kind of a hard sell today. But the benefits of the study of Latin are easily argued to. Latin gives you a preparation for logic due to its systematic approach, gives you a richer vocabulary with a deeper knowledge of the roots of words, which we need. It helps you with your understanding of the English language and grammar, and it is the language of the church. So therefore, with the prayers and the songs of the church that we're now saying in Latin, there's more meaning to the students who know the language, and they can understand it. In history, in the past we taught from textbooks, which were uninteresting and oftentimes politically biased. Also, there wasn't a coherent approach to teaching U.S. or Western civilization in our schools. Now, we have a strong focus in the history of the Western civilization, beginning with Greece and Rome in the 3rd and 4th grade, and a strong focus on U.S. history. And the final thread we include is to understand salvation history as presented in the scriptures and church history since the time of Christ. The most significant means that we use to teach history is what we call a narrative approach. A narrative approach simply means a story approach. For example, if you're studying Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad through an excellent book about her life, this brings a much richer appreciation of her and her life during this time period. Compare this with the approach using a traditional social studies textbook, which would dryly cover the Underground Railroad in a paragraph or two, and Harriet Tubman in a few sentences. In that well-written book about Harriet Tubman, you will also learn about the greater picture of slavery and other events at this time. We believe that the narrative approach fosters deepness and richness and enjoyment in the learning about the person's actions and events in history over the dryness with the social studies textbook. One more point about history. This subject lends itself well to ask our teachers to probe again into the goodness, truth, and beauty found in these historical persons and these events that happened in history. Think about Washington crossing the Delaware, the Trail of Tears, or the Ku Klux Klan. What is the truth of those situations, or the lack of goodness found in them that needs to be brought forward? The lens of looking for and finding the goodness, truth, and beauty is one we aim for in all the subject areas. Admittedly, all of this is a work in progress. In science, frankly, this curriculum area has taken the longest for us to build. But one basic principle we want to convey to our students every year is that there is no conflict between faith and reason. If you've looked at the studies of teenagers, and more people are really finding this divorce between science and faith is really a reason to lose their faith in again, the technocratic paradigm, right? Because it's that omnipresent. Another key approach that we're working on regarding life science or biology in elementary schools is simply to get outside and study nature. This means growing gardens, having bird feeders, collecting insects and bringing them into the classroom and studying them, or studying them outside. Having terrariums in the classroom, learning how to identify trees and plants and animals outside. We believe that this approach to science does a couple things. First, it grounds our students in the reality of nature. And in our relativistic culture, such as we live, knowing that beings in nature are real, starting with the real, and almost a reverence and wonder for the real in nature is a really important step for young people. Again, the purpose of treating the subject matter this way is to help students fall in love with the subject, right? To fall in love with it so that they'll want to study it when they're older. And also gain a deeper love for the earth and stewardship of the earth and its beauty. And that all of this is a gift from God. In mathematics, we did move over most of our schools to Singapore math, which is used, to my knowledge, in a fair number of Catholics in just classical schools. It is really one of the best success rate curriculums in the world, and we're having good success with it. So we're really pleased with what we're getting out of that. So to summarize a few of the points you've heard in all of these subject areas, we look for and foster the wonder within that subject matter. Close to this fostering of wonder is forming tastes of the students for goodness, truth, and beauty. And this takes practice. If you weren't trained to do this, it really takes practice. And our teachers are getting better at this. We have some teachers that are running with it, some principals that are running with it. Some it's coming. And then slowing down and going deeper into the subject matter. Because too often in education, we're covering things. We're not really learning them, and we're not getting inspired by what there is there. But besides those academic subjects, we're also working on virtues, moral and academic virtues. Let's take an example of the virtue of studiousness. What qualities do students need to possess to have that virtue? And I'm just going to name some that I have here. Focus, memorization, ability to analyze, ability to think deeply and contemplate with a sense of wonder. Those are some of the habits we would hope a student would have to have that virtue. Our academic virtues are respectful, responsible, engaged, expressive, attentive, organized, and diligent. So I'm ending this section by referring a little bit to teacher education, because remember, I have 99 people that need it. So we do a summer conference, and this year's theme is really right up the alley of what this topic of the talk is about. We're trying to help our teachers reflect upon the components of classical education that we want them to be lesson planning and unit planning around. It's a 2-day conference in June. That's one of the ways we've been forming our teachers. We found a great resource. It's a publisher called Classical Academic Press, and they publish a set of courses called Classical U. And there's a menu of 35 classes on that website, which really is going to help our teachers. We bought subscriptions for all 100 teachers, and they're going to be able to, at their own leisure, pick up a course or one of the videos within the course and watch it, and we come back and visit as staffs on it.